Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're really excited to have Paige and Kate and the Kosta Brown team here with us this evening to share with us their amazing wines. They're going to give you a great virtual tour of the property. Unfortunately, we wish we could all be there, but hopefully in the near future. So they're going to give us a little teaser, really, so that we can all plan a trip up there afterwards, right, to celebrate. So without further ado, I will pass it on over to Kate at Kosta Brown, who's going to start with a great virtual tour for you. We're going to go through, well, I'll let her tell you what we're going to do, and then we'll go through the wines. So please, if you have any questions, let us know with the chat. We'll be doing that after the virtual tasting, and as we go, we'll be fielding those questions, and just really excited to have everybody here. So thank you again for joining, and Kate, take it away.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome everybody to Kosta Brown. A little echoey in our barrel room right now. So where we're going to start today is one of two barrel rooms that we have on property. The other one is across the street. I'm not going to make you virtually walk that far. So where we are right now, it's a little bit empty. We just finished up bottling. So a little bit empty in this space right now. Most of what is in here at this point is all 2019 single vineyard designate wines. So those won't begin bottling until probably March, April of this year. So looking a little vacant, but that's not a bad thing. That just means we have more wine in bottle that's going to be released soon. So we moved into the space where we are at right now in the Barlow in Sebastapol in 2014 is when Michael and Dan moved into the Barlow. We are an anchor tenant of the Barlow here in Sebastapol, and we have the largest footprint. But somebody asked me the other day, what do we argue about here at the winery? And it is always space. There's never enough of it for everybody. So it looks very spacious, but it's amazing how quickly we fill it up. So tons of barrel options here. Predominantly what we use is French and Austrian oak. We don't use American. So mostly medium to light toast from about 4 different coopers in France and then a couple in Austria. So this is one space. Blaze, who was my cameraman today, can kind of pan very quickly to one of our hospitality spaces that hopefully someday you will be able to join us in here. That's our kitchen. And then we'll take a quick walk through our courtyard, which is where we are currently hosting people because we have to be outside. So follow me.
So while Kate is walking, I just want to invite you all to pour yourself a glass of whatever you would like to taste first. We're really open to bouncing back and forth in our tasting. So enjoy a glass, start with that Chardonnay, get into the Santa Rita, whatever floats your boat. And I will pass it back off to her in our beautiful courtyard.
A glimpse of our courtyard. This is where we're currently hosting guests right now. The black vessels that kind of look like alien spaceships are actually smaller cement vessels that we do fermentation in. Right now, during harvest, they're actually used for crowd control because we actually do some Chardonnay ferments in that center area of our courtyard in the sun. So that's kind of the space that we're looking at right now. There's a few more spaces down there where you have a little bit more production, and then we just got propane for our heaters. So pretty excited to finally be able to be hosting guests here on property again, since we've kind of been back and forth for the last year. So we're going to cut through the courtyard, or no, we're not. We're going to go this way. Sorry. And we'll take you into our small lot fermentation room.
So if you are able to come and visit us, we are open for very limited appointments right now. And we obviously would love to see everyone in person who's comfortable doing that. We are doing everything, as Kate said, outside, but we have heaters, we have blankets, we have all sorts of goodies to keep everybody warm and happy in this interesting time we find ourselves in. And hopefully sooner rather than later, we will be welcoming everyone in a larger group to join us all together. So Kate is stepping into our small lot fermentation room now. It looks like, there we go. Yeah.
So this is our small lot fermentation room. So this is essentially where all of our single vineyard designate wines are made and fermented during harvest. So right now things are obviously a little bit quieter than they were in the fall. We have what we very lovingly refer to as our big woodies, the big oak wooden tanks that we do some fermentation in. The black vessels are more cement vessels for fermentation. You've probably seen those at other wineries. Usually they're gray. We didn't like the aesthetics of the gray color, so of course we painted them black. And it just looks a lot better. So this is our small lot fermentation room, and then I'm gonna pass you guys up to Paige and kind of get a glimpse of where she's tasting, and I will catch up with you guys here in a minute.
So you can see the back and the front of me right now. Very exciting. Kate's gonna join us in another room so we can also safely socially distance taste with you today. So we're gonna go through a lineup of the wines, taste through those notes with you, and then we're gonna open it up for questions. We love questions. We love hearing your thoughts. So please send things through the chat box, raise your hand if you're dying to join in, and we will find a time for everybody to get to talk with each other. So our lineup to start today, we're going to start with the 116 Chardonnay. We're going to move into the Santa Rita Pinot Noir. Then we'll visit the Russian River, then Sonoma Coast, and then we're going to finish with the Gaps Crown. So grab that Chardonnay, give it a swirl, stick your nose in there. Chardonnay is definitely, and Kate, join in here at any point, is a fun story for Kosta Browne. So we did not make Chardonnay for a very long time. And then we were going to a lot of wine dinners, and we had to pour somebody else's white to start. And Michael and Dan didn't like that so much. So they decided that we needed to make our own white wine, started making Chardonnay, and that was kind of the heyday of Rombauer. So definitely this big oaky Chardonnay and that kind of old school California style. And then a gentleman named Nico, who became our winemaker, he was just begging to make Chardonnay himself. Loves white Burgundy, really wanted to see what we could do with the Chardonnay in this area. And they basically were like, yeah, sure, kid, like have fun. Let's see what you got. So he made our first barrel of El Diablo. Turned out so well that they gave him the entire Chardonnay program. So that's kind of when we moved a little bit away from the super oakiness to something that I find to be a really beautifully balanced Chardonnay. I think it's a really great expression of what Chardonnay in California can be. It is still aged in oak, so it does get some of that roundness, but not a lot of new oak, and is really acid driven. So you get that really beautiful brightness with Chardonnay. It pairs well with so many things. I personally love having it with oysters, seafood. It's crab season, you know, having a beautiful meal with that. So, Kate, anything to add on the Chardonnay front? Oh, I think you're muted. Uh-oh, never mind. She'll chime in when she's unmuted. So.
Sorry, I'm unmuted now. That's normally a thing for me. Usually mute is what most people want to put me on. Yeah, Chardonnay, I mean, I always describe if our Pinot Noir program over the years has really been a revolution. The Chardonnay program in the last 5 years has really been an evolution. And it's, I mean, it's just been really exciting to see those wines. I always tell the joke that Dan Costa's father, Tom, the first couple of vintages that we made Chardonnay, Tom didn't like it and literally called some of his friends and was like, don't buy the Kosta Browne Chardonnay, it's not good. And it was like, wait, Tom, like we gotta wait. And so it's been really exciting to see the progress that our Chardonnay program has made. We do only allocate 2 Chardonnays. We allocate the 116, which you guys are tasting today. It is very cleverly named for Highway 116 here in Sebastapol. We're very creative in the wine naming that day. Most of the vineyards that we are sourcing for this wine are located off of Highway 116, so go figure. And then we also have our El Diablo Chardonnay. So those are our only 2 Chardonnays that are allocated to our list members. But I think it's just really exciting. One of my jobs at the winery is to go to offsite events and pour wine. And it's really, really fun to have people come to Kosta Browne and say Pinot, 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 and then come back and want more Chardonnay, which I think is just a really exciting, that's a big compliment in my opinion. So we're pretty excited about it. Hopefully you guys are too.
And I think, as Kate was saying, right now there's 2 that are allocated, but I sense that there may be more Chardonnay on her horizon as we all are really loving the white program. So something really exciting to look forward to as well. So moving into the Santa Rita Hills, Santa Rita is a place that is near and dear to my heart. I'm very excited that as we have expanded where we source our grapes, we have included the Santa Rita Hills in that area. It's a really amazing place to visit if you haven't been. It is one of only 2 east-west valleys in the world. And because of that, the transverse valley, the ocean winds like get sucked in, and it creates this really cool, cooling maritime effect, even further inland and up in the hills and in the Santa Maria Valley. We're very lucky to be sourcing our grapes from some really amazing growers, including from Mount Carmel and Radian, and just a really exciting place to be. The soil there is because of the ocean rushing in and rushing out millions of years ago. It's really cool, like clay, and you're finding fossils, and then you go somewhere else. And geologically, a winemaker in the area told me it's like on the 7th day, God had all of these pieces left and he didn't know what to do them. So he just threw them all in that area. So you really find all different types of soil there, all different types of terroir. And I just think that this wine is really exciting and a really nice look forward to as Kosta Browne continues to grow as a brand. We're getting into more of our classics in a minute, and this is definitely a look towards some of the exciting projects we're doing in the future. So those are my fun notes about Santa Rita. Highly recommend visiting. I'm hoping that we can get something set up. I'm probably speaking out of turn, but where we can have members and people like yourselves visit us there as well, and maybe do a remote tasting experience outside of Sonoma County. But so those are some of my hopes. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box yet, so we're just gonna keep moving along these tasting notes, and then you can revisit and we can see what everybody's favorite is. So we're moving into Russian River Valley next. I recently moved to Sonoma County in September, and I really think that living here now and being in the Russian River Valley, this wine just like screams of place. The fog.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know they were probably just pouring into their next glass. So why don't we just take a pause and see if there are questions about the Santa Rita Hills, and go with that, and then we can go kind of slowly one by one, just so people aren't feeling rushed, and I want them to enjoy the wine as well. It's not.
Absolutely, Dan. Thank you for slowing me down. I'm just, I'm excited. I keep talking. You gotta jump in there.
So I would say I'm going to start it off with any questions on the Chardonnay or the Santa Rita Hills as we're getting into it. Any questions about the winemaking, about the facilities, about why where they are located? I think we have one coming in. The question is about your irrigation practices. So I guess let's bring that back to first of all, with the Chardonnay, we'll combine them together, the Chardonnay and the Santa Rita Hills, but across the board, farming practices, how many specific plots and vineyards are you sourcing from? What type of, are you doing any cold soaking? Are you picking, hand picking? What are your viticulture practices across the board?
Absolutely. I'll start, and I'm gonna hand it off to you, Kate. In regards to how many plots, we actually source from a lot of different places. Kosta Brown started, and we did not have any estate vineyards. We were buying grapes to start. Over the years, we have been lucky enough to purchase some vineyards, and we also have a 100-year lease on a few vineyards. And over that process, we have established really amazing relationships with the growers that we work with. And it's very important to us to have great relationships with our growers so that we are involved in knowing what their farming practices are. Sustainability, all of those things are very, very important to us. So for instance, the 116 Chardonnay, we source that from several different vineyards that grow along 116. Some of them are literally like a stone's throw from the winery. You could probably walk there. Would you say, Kate? Maybe a long walk, but
Right, but still, I mean, what else are we doing during COVID? Like, you know, you gotta get your exercise somewhere.
Exactly. So like El Diablo, for instance, that is a Valdez property, who's a really iconic grower in the area, and we've worked with them for a long time. So we do work with, to answer the dry irrigation question, as sustainably and responsibly as possible. And we really want to continue moving in that direction, to make sure that we are being good stewards of the earth and working with people who are doing that as well. So that's extremely important to us. And I'm sure people have heard enough of my voice. So Kate, I'll let you talk a little bit more about our winemaking.
Yeah, I mean, from a dry irrigation standpoint, every vineyard is different. It's kind of like its own little baby. So we don't have like a blanket farming plan. Each vineyard is treated totally and completely different. And to be totally honest, when we're buying multiple different sections from one particular vineyard, each section is treated differently as well. Because something that's at a higher elevation, maybe above the fog line, so it doesn't get as much fog influence or just those residual basically water droplets, as something that might be below the fog line. So we're very, like Piz was saying, we do try to encourage our vineyards and support them being as sustainable as they possibly can. Farming organically and farming officially sustainably is a very long process to actually get your vineyard designated as completely biodynamic organic. Most of our farmers do farm their vineyards that way. They are just rebels and they don't go through the certification of it because they're farmers. So yeah, we're sourcing from vineyards from Anderson Valley all the way down to Santa Rita Hills. I would say we are purchasing now from 40 plus different vineyards. You're not going to see every single one of those vineyards be a single vineyard designate for Kosta Brown. There is a vineyard in our Sonoma Coast Pinot called the Marshall Vineyard. And we specifically buy from that vineyard to put it into the Sonoma Coast blend. We will probably never make it as a single vineyard designate because we feel like it is a great blending vineyard, and that's really where it shows its stuff to bring more oomph to that one specific wine. So we do try to be as sustainable as possible when we can. And then from a winemaking perspective, what Julien, our winemaker, always says is there is a blueprint and a foundation for each vineyard, as in that what we've done in the past as far as fermentations and picking, but it always depends on what Mother Nature gives us. So there's always a blueprint and there's a foundation, but we also experiment every single vintage depending on what Mother Nature gives us. A great example is 2019. We got a lot more fruit from Pizzoni Vineyard than what we had anticipated. So Julien could do some kind of funky, weird fermentations with that extra fruit. He did a carbonic fermentation, which isn't something we had ever done with Pizzoni. So we got to play a little bit. So winemakers are definitely artists. So the more we can let them art, the better. They're happy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'll just chime in really quickly. Just first of all, with the farming practices, it is becoming more and more of a conscious note for everyone as a consumer, as a conscious consumer, about how things are being done. But to Paige's or to Kate's point, farmers and generational farmers have been doing things in a lot of ways very sustainably for a very long time. Why? Because pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, all of those things cost a lot of money, actually. So they're not rich, and so they've always looked at how can they look in the land to do the least amount possible to get the best fruit possible. Also along those lines, organic and biodynamic certifications are expensive. Again, they don't have a ton of money to spare. So I've known a lot of farmers, wine growers personally, who have told me this story many times. They treat their vineyards as their children. And so if their child is sick, they're gonna give it medicine because that's their livelihood. So it doesn't necessarily, it's always a balance, right? There's a correlation between, yes, being responsible and sustainable, and those things are very important, but also making sure that these people can stay around from vintage to vintage, and keep producing amazing fruit. And to that note also, I think the blueprint is a great analogy, because the difference of wine compared to spirit, right, is that every vintage is different, and that's what makes it interesting. We have a story in a bottle versus a vodka or something of that nature that has a very specific tasting profile that the mixer or the mixologist the blender needs to make sure that they maintain the whole time. So I think those are great questions.
Well, and I think to jump on to what you're saying, Daniel, and with vintages, I mean, I think if you look at the last few years, you couldn't think of different vintages, right? Like, we're talking about 2018 being a really like idyllic weather season from start to finish, but 2017, 2020, through some really big curveballs, and each vineyard responds differently to that, and the fruit that you can get, and then the wine that you can make from that. And so I think that each parcel is different and has something different to say based on where it's grown and what happened that year. And that translates into the winery as well. And I think one of the things that I really love about our wines is that respect for the different wines. So it's, Santa Rita in 2020 may be different than Santa Rita in 2018. And we want it to speak to what the vintage and the appellation has to say for that vintage.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think it's great. Another question that came in was about tasting notes for each wine, characteristics of the wine, and food pairings. Food pairings are absolutely my favorite thing, so that's an exciting one. But yeah, tasting notes. Well, the thing about tasting is it's so unique and individualistic, right? So everyone picks up on their own notes, which is awesome. So I would love to throw it out there for anyone who feels comfortable to type in the chat what they're finding, and we can have a conversation about it and see what people are getting. I'd say let's start with the red. Maybe for the white, Paige kind of went through that with pairing. I love the crab. I love the oysters. I think that all fits really well. Definitely there's really classic white Burgundy fruit there of apple, citrus, Meyer lemon, great minerality to it, kind of dusty rock. Beautiful white flowers coming through as well. So I think that wine is just soaring right now, and it's in a really nice place. Let's hear if anyone is brave enough to type in. I mean, don't be shy. It's not everyone is right. That's the beauty of wine, right? You have your own opinion. So
there's no wrong answers.
That's right. That's right. So be brave, and let's see what we can get.
Absolutely. Roast chicken with herbs.
Yeah, I love that.
I mean, I always want roast chicken, so there's that, but great Pinot pairing for sure.
Yep, agreed. Yes, so we haven't gotten to the Russian River yet, but we will definitely hold that one on to when we get there. It's okay, Colleen. Jump the gun. She's super excited. She's very excited. Not to call her out, but it's fine. It's fine.
You can taste ahead and come back. It's okay.
Yeah.
I also think just an amazing, classic pairing for any Pinot is beets. Beet and goat cheese ravioli. I'm a real happy girl.
Yeah,
with any of these Pinots, I think that's gonna be just showing beautifully.
Yeah, we have a maple syrup and black pepper in the Santa Rita. I definitely can see what you're saying, but there's that kind of caramel toasted note, which you're definitely picking up from the oak usage, as well as the black pepper, a little spicier notes that coming from the south. It's a little, I always get that kind of from Santa Rita. You get those kind of spicy black pepper and kind of herbs of Provence, kind of always, it's more herbaceous in style. I don't know. There's also a lot of salinity that comes through there.
I get a lot of what I think of as a summer salad from the Santa Rita, some basil, maybe even a little strawberry, that early summer, all that great produce coming in.
Yeah, I think the red fruits are a really important call to highlight, right? There's definitely the strawberries, I would say raspberries as well, for sure. Classic cherry, kirsch components, absolutely. Anyone else care to chime in? Everyone's doing great. Highly recommend everyone chiming in.
I'm so bad at pairings because I'm just like, can we just pair it with a glass on the couch and call it a night? I'm pairing all day, every
And that is definitely totally fine.
I also, maybe it's just because I'm hungry right now, but with the Santa Rita, I'm thinking like a really beautiful, like pork chop, something a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit richer than the chicken, but that has that nice, like a grilled pork chop outside.
Salmon would be amazing too with the Santa Rita, especially. I think that would be super pretty.
Yeah, that definitely the salmon with the sea influence, the salty, I think really pairs nicely.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the Russian River?
Let's do it.
All right, Paige, take it away.
Great. Well, we'll get your nose in there. The Russian River for me, I think the 2018 over the last, tasting it a lot recently has really just started to sing. I think it's really, it's out there, it's dancing, it's ready to have a good time. These are some of my tasting notes. You'll hear music and feelings, and not necessarily always fruit, which is also right. For our current release, if you're interested, we actually did a really cool project called Sound of Wine. And Julien gave what he thought the music would be for each appellation. And technically those are for the 2019s, but it's all the appellations that you're tasting here. And I think they really pertain to that. So I believe, was Russian River the pop song, Kate? Was that the classic, like,
isn't it Bruno Mars or something?
Yeah, something with a really good like dance beat, like to get you going, just that kind of thing that you want to listen to. And the Russian River really says that to me. Russian River is a really cool, quite literally, I wasn't trying to be punny, but it's a cool area of the world. The fog really comes in more than you hear about it, and then you get up here and you wake up in the morning and you can't drive to work because you're totally socked in. And you really get that beautiful, cool moisture coming in. That shift in temperature really allows the grapes to ripen. I'm seeing eucalyptus coming in a chat, and I think that there is actually a lot of eucalyptus that grows in the Russian River Valley. So definitely not a wrong tasting note there. This is just really like all of like the black cherry, raspberry, like that really nice meeting of red and blue fruit for me. I feel like I'm probably leaving out something really important, Kate. I don't know. What am I missing here?
Well, so the way Paige and I split up the tasting, she's got the Russian River up there and I'm hoarding the Sonoma Coast down here. But Russian River to me, at least for us, the way, like when I'm drinking the Russian River Appellation blend, the last time I did, it's like sinking into the most amazing leather chair you've ever sat in. And just everything about it is just kind of perfect. There's no knees, there's no elbows. It's just everything about it hits all the right places. So that's what I would say about Russian River. It's just there's a fullness to it without it being overbearing, which is, I think, one of the reasons people fall in love with Russian River so quickly and so easily, because it's so approachable all the time.
Well, the jump on Kate's, I just want to drink all of these on the couch point. This is definitely my, like, get home, just want to open a bottle and have a glass. There's definitely a lot of great food pairings that we could do with this, but this is definitely my go-to, even if I'm not eating. Love this wine. When we switch over into the Sonoma Coast is definitely like a wine that I want to have some food with. So I think the Russian River and that kind of like, I feel like we're getting into easy, like a Sunday morning here. It's just a happy place to be. So I think I saw a question pop up about alcohol levels. The fun fact while you're tasting.
Do you have them?
I do.
Oh, I was just looking. Go for it.
Every Pinot is either 14.1 or 14.2, with the exception of the Sonoma Coast, which I think gets to 14.4. So they're really, I think that's the other really fascinating thing. And this is such a great example of terroir and how different a wine can be, even something that's grown close together, is that all of these very similar alcohol, very, you know, same approach to winemaking, and you're getting something very different in each of your glasses. So it's a cool journey through California Pinot in that way as well.
And the Chardonnay is 13.9. So, and I mean, another point about alcohol, especially for Kosta Browne, if you go back, and Dan and I talked about this when Dan actually came to visit the winery, the first vintages of Kosta Browne, the alcohol, I mean, we went back through some of our library stuff and it was on the label like 15.5, 16%, which realistically is actually more like 16.5, which is really, really high. So it's definitely been a conscious thing and that kind of gets into this next question I saw about ageability. When you have very, very high alcohol wines, they tend to not age as long because you have to have a lot of fruit, and you tend to have a lot of fruit when you have higher alcohol wines. And the more the wines age, the more that alcohol, the fruit falls away, and all you're going to taste is the alcohol. So it's really been a conscious thing for Kosta Browne as a brand in the last 5 or so years to rein that in a little bit and not have our wines be made to, you can open them 10 years later and confidently know that wine is going to be singing beautifully. We say the sweet spot for Kosta Browne is 5 to 7 years. To be totally honest, I opened a 2008 Sonoma Coast a week ago, and I told my boyfriend, I'm like, I'm not vouching for this wine. I'm not vouching for it. Let's just see what happens. And it was absolutely singing. So I think making sure that you are storing it appropriately, being very conscious about it. 30 years, I think, is pushing it. But 20, maybe. But 30, I think, would be pushing it beyond its ability.
Yeah, I think that I'll just chime in here quickly. Yeah. With a light skin varietal like Pinot, regardless of where it's being grown, whether it be Burgundy or here in the States, 20 plus years, you're pushing its boundaries of really where it's going to be showing its best. Yes, there will be some interesting things about it, but it's I like 15 to 20 years really is kind of, for most, as a very broad generalization for Pinot. That's kind of where you're going to look at maxing out on that. So we had some tasting notes from Paige, but the chat is very quiet with this. So we got the eucalyptus note, which definitely, I'll chime in about the Russian River. So when I'm blinding wines, Russian River is one of those wines that you always just find I think you said it like sinking into a couch, and it's true. There's always this like plushness to the wine. And an ability to just kind of sink in and enjoy. There's a voluptuousness about it. The cherries are always just ripe, if not just a touch overripe. You get the raspberries and the strawberries that are almost getting to the point of being like a candy, but not quite there yet. And then you get that nice little like eucalyptus vegetal characteristic, which is super classic of Russian River. So, I mean, when I taste this wine, it's always one of those hallmarks of what I hope to be blinding for a Russian River Pinot. So,
absolutely,
yeah. What's everyone else getting? Not everyone all at once. It's okay. It's okay. Cherry cobbler. Yeah, cherry cobbler. That's an awesome one. Definitely the blackberries as well. I think Russian River, as we'll see going in, not to like lead the witness going forward, but the Russian River definitely has this like almost, I think the cobbler or like what am I looking for? Like a berry tart is always kind of what I find versus that in the Russian River versus that of something on the coast. So we'll see if that's true or not in these wines, but darker fruit than the Santa Rita Hills, absolutely. Santa Rita, I always find a spiciness to the wine that is definitely lost in the Russian River. That's great. Shall we move on to the Sonoma Coast?
Yeah. Do it.
Great. Thanks everyone for your input.
Yeah, we love input. Just get in there. Sonoma Coast is kind of the It's the Kosta Brown wine. 2009 is when we were, that vintage was named Wine of the Year. In what was that, 2011, Kate, is when that was announced. And I think that it is such a great moment to talk about California and the North Coast. And Sonoma Coast is a huge appellation. If you look at a map, which you should be able to find probably on KB Spring that I think Colleen shared, you can also go to kbvirtual.com, and there are some interactive maps there for you as well. And you'll see, like, you know, it stretches way up north, it comes all the way down to Sebastapol. So you're getting a lot of different influences there. It's also coastal vineyards coming inland. But I think that this wine does a really great job sort of representing what California Pinot is capable of being. It has some ageability to talk about everything that we were talking about before. I think that it just really, it has some nice tension to it, that balance between acid and some tannin, and really just representing what's possible. And as I said before, for me, this is more of a food wine. I think that structure, that little bit more of, what's the word I'm looking for? But really that structure in your mouth, it wants some food. It wants to play with something like lamb chops is immediately what I go to when I try this wine. Like, I want something a little meaty, I want something a little gamey to play with that, like blueberry fruit and that brightness. So those are I feel like I'm tripping over my own words right now. So I'm gonna
and to be fair to Paige, I have the Sonoma, like I said, I'm hoarding the Sonoma Coast down here. But I think the way it's interesting to taste the Sonoma Coast and the Santa Rita. Visually for me, I think of the Santa Rita Hills vines as they live in this really pretty growing region. It never gets too hot, and it never gets too cold, and it's just easy breezy and wonderful. And Sonoma Coast is much more rugged and wild and a little bit more feral. So the Santa Rita wine is, you know, those vines have just kind of had a little bit of an easy breezy life. And the Sonoma Coast vines, they have seen some stuff. And it comes through on the wine. You get, to me, it's much more intense, and this sort of screams Kosta Brown. And to kind of, to Paige's point as well, which I didn't know prior to working at Kosta Brown, the 2009 Sonoma Coast Pinot from Kosta Brown is the only California Pinot that has ever received Wine of the Year from Wine Spectator. So we're pretty excited about that, and it's nice to kind of come back to that occasionally, which is cool.
Well, I also think it's a good time to talk about, you know, we do single vineyard wine, and we have the Gaps Crown coming up, and we love doing single vineyard wine, but we also really love doing our appellation blends. It is not a secondary project for Kosta Brown. It's just as important as the single vineyard wines. So creating something each year that we feel is representative of these appellations and does them justice is really important. And I think that that's really important to Julien to make sure when he's barrel sampling all those barrels that you saw. And the reason we have so many fermentation vessels is because we ferment everything on its own. Everything is done completely parcel by parcel, and it's not blended until probably a year later, which is, you know, the hard way of doing things. But it really allows us to let each vineyard sing, let each one figure out what it's going to say, and allows Julien to create a blend that's really representative of the place and the vintage, which is a really exciting thing. And I think that you can really sense that throughout all of these Pinots as we taste through them. So the Sonoma Coast, you know, became our flagship wine, but I think it's still, all of these appellation wines, like, that still really holds true. It's a special thing to get to be a part of. Is any of the 2009 available for purchase? Is there any 2009 left, Kate? I don't even, maybe somewhere? Is it?
There is. There is. We've got like 5 cases of it left. It is literally like, it's one of those wines where I can see it in our inventory. I can't see the location. So like literally we have it. It's just no one is telling anybody where it is. Mostly because they know if they bring it into the hospitality space, well, it'll get consumed.
Yeah, we'll find a reason to open it. So we can't be trusted. So that's an excellent question. I doubt that there's much available for purchase. I can see us in a future where we're able to have events again, doing something special where we might open a bottle, in that future times when we're allowed to host dinners again. Or
What do you
come
think,
visit
Daniel?
you at the Battery for dinners. Yeah.
What do you think about it, Dan?
The Sonoma Coast?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, Paige, the word you were looking for is savory.
Thank you. I don't know where.
Yeah, it's okay. There's always, Sonoma Coast always has a savoriness to it. It's always like that rosemary that's grilling on top of the lamb chops on an open flame that you kind of there's an unctuousness to it that always yields to food. It's always a great pairing with food, but it kind of leads you there, right? Whereas the Russian River and the Santa Rita Hills, perfect couch wines, no problem. The Sonoma Coast is definitely something that you want something to go with it. It's a pairing versus its own star, right? But in its own way, in a very like supporting role. I love this wine. I find it to be very vibrant. To me, this is the most, and this is kind of true of Sonoma Coast in general, the most floral out of them that we're getting. So we're getting really a lot of those really beautiful roses coming into play that I love of Pinot. It's like rose potpourri that I just, with this like savoriness to it. So I find the wines to be super beautiful. And just one of those, like, there's a reason that it's the flagship or the best known. And I think it always holds true. So, I think this, the 18 is showing beautifully. So. Anyone else? To me, this is, so before we start with tasting notes, but I get a little rhubarb pie, if anyone else gets that. That's kind of that like savory, kind of red fruited thing going on. So.
Savory meets floral meets.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Yes. Good call, Colleen. Unmuting is always good.
All right. Well, I think since no one is unmuting yet, we do have the 2017 Gaps Crown, which I think is a great way for us, after having all these appellation wines, to get into one of our single vineyards for you. And we are also switching a vintage on you. We're going to 2017, so a little bit different. 2017 was definitely a vintage that had its fair share of curveballs. So maybe not as idyllic a growing season as 2018. But I think sometimes those vintages are the ones that really go the distance. Grapes like to work for it. They don't want too much water. They don't want, they want that sweet spot to struggle. So I think that 2017 is turning into a vintage that I think people had a lot of, maybe trepidation about how it would turn out, at least for certain areas, and is turning into something that I think is showing pretty beautifully. Kate, do you want to talk a little bit about our history with Gaps Crown?
Yeah. Caitlin, totally right that Sonoma Coast tends to have more tannins. That's for sure. You're going to get that both on the 18 Sonoma Coast and the 17 Gaps Crown. The 18 might show a little bit more tannicky because it has had less time in bottle. Gaps Crown has had a little more time to settle, be a little bit less pouty, and kind of spread out in the bottle.
That also, to that point, is why it calls for food, right? Like tannins and food, those are the lock and key. The tannins require fat to then mute them so that it seems super smooth. So that lends to that savoriness.
Yeah, I love that description. Yeah, so Gaps Crown is a massive vineyard. The vineyard is about 385 planted acres. We say that this is an estate property for us. It's not actually an estate property. We just have a 100-year lease with the vineyard, so it's as good as a state, but we don't actually own it. We have an amazing relationship with the Price family who do own the property. We actually have such a great relationship with them that they Kosta Browne gets first pick of what parts of the vineyard we are going to be sourcing from every year before anyone else who buys Gaps Crown. Because it's such a big vineyard that you're going to see Gaps Crown out there by other producers. But it's really, really cool that we get essentially first dibs. It changes every year. Our viticulturalist can kind of go out there and take a look at things, and he will go back into our history from buying from that property and kind of see what has worked, what hasn't. And maybe there's a new lot that he wants to experiment with and that Julien wants to experiment with. This is, how much does each, it's a great question about Gaps Crown. That's one of the reasons that I love this vineyard is because you are going to taste it. And I'm sure Dan can speak on this more. I'm very partial because I drink Kosta Browne Gaps Crown. But I have tasted other people's Gaps and they are wildly different. Other people's Gaps Crown vineyard. They are very, very different because the vineyard is so big, and you're going to get different levels of elevation. You're going to get different levels of sun exposure, different levels of fog, different levels of wind. And so that's Gaps Crown is such an intriguing vineyard for that reason. But Dan can probably speak to it better than I can as far as other people's experience with Gaps Crown and kind of what other wineries do with that vineyard.
Yeah, for sure. The ones that I've tasted a bunch. And they, like you're saying, they're wildly different. I mean, a lot of it has to do with obviously where they're sourcing from within the vineyard itself. I mean, as you said, there's over 300 acres. It's absolutely huge when you think about it. So the exposure of the plots that they're picking from within Gaps Crown differ tremendously, both by sun exposure, wind, elevation, soil, all of the above. But then you also have the winemaking influence as well. So then that's going to create a huge difference within that. So I think this is a really good point of like knowing your winemakers or your wineries and how they treat their wines is how they're basically going to keep going in that same trajectory for their Gaps Crown fruit.
Yeah, I think it's definitely. Again, like Dan was saying, every vineyard is its own little baby, and we treat every vineyard differently. They don't all take the same. One size does not fit all. And so I think it's fun to see what other winemakers do with properties that we have the same as far as purchasing from, because everybody's going to do something different, and everybody, it's also in that same breath, every vintage is going to give us something different. Mother Nature is always going to be a mother, and she's going to give us something different every year. And so it's really nice to see what those winemakers are going to do with that, and be able to play and have some fun with it. And, Gaps Crown is one of those that it's just a vineyard that shows beautifully. I've never had a bad Gaps Crown from any winemaker or any winery, and that's a pretty cool feather for that vineyard to have in its cap.
So I'm seeing a question that's saying the handful of other named wines. I'm guessing that means other single vineyard wines that we produce. So we work with a lot of different single vineyards, and sometimes those things like Gaps Crown we make almost every year. There are other single vineyards that we haven't made every single year for one reason or another. I think Cerise is a great example of another vineyard that is actually an estate vineyard for us now. Ted Litterai also makes Cerise, so I'm thinking of another winemaker. If you wanted to do a side-by-side, I love tasting Kosta Browne Cerise next to Litterai Cerise. I think it's a great example of two great winemakers utilizing a really, really rustic, kind of crazy vineyard and what can come out of it. Kiefer Ranch is another one that we use. What else? Kate, are we?
Yeah, I mean, just we make. Yeah, I mean, we make 20 plus different Pinots every year. And only a few of those are distributed, but Gaps Crown is an amazing one. Kiefer Ranch is kind of from a vineyard perspective, again, that's another one that a lot of people make, Kiefer Ranch, and that is an old, reliable, I fell in love with that vineyard many, many years ago, and it's just one of those properties that consistently produces. I think the thing about, all of our wines is, again, every wine and every vineyard is treated differently, and we want to have the best showing that we possibly can and the best representation of each property that we can every year. Getting off the membership wait list. Well, now you know somebody, two somebodies that can get you off the wait list and get you onto the active list. So it's all about who you know.
Yeah, just let us know. We're happy to do what we can. I also think for the questions, speaking to vineyards and the places we use, one of the things that I really love about what we do is we're super, super, super transparent about where everything is coming from and what we're doing. So if you log into our website and you go to wines, you can find out every vineyard that was used in that vintage of an appellation wine. You can find out the clones of grapes that we used in the single vineyard wines. So a lot of those technical details that you might be interested in, all that information is there for you as well if we're not hitting all those this evening.
Anyone, you probably saw it, but where they can buy the Kosta Brown wines out in the real world, other than here at the Battery, of course, we have them.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, well, the Battery.
And I know that right now, unsurprisingly, we don't actually make a lot of each wine. We make a lot of different wines, but we make a small quantity of each of those wines. So we do sell through them. And I know that we are in the process of releasing a new vintage into the marketplace. So for in San Francisco right now, we can find out and let you know what retailers might have our wine right now. I can tell you right now that 116 does not exist outside of the Battery in San Francisco. I think you're the only one that has any left, Dan. So if you're enjoying that Chardonnay, that's the place to get it. And we can find out exactly where there might be some other opportunities for you. I don't know off the top of my head, but we are definitely happy to always reach out and see who might have some available.
Definitely pass that information along to Dan so that he can dispel that to all of you, because there are some retail locations, not a whole lot, but there are a couple. Yeah, like I can't remember off the top of my head. I wish my memory was that good, but I've slept.
Well, and we'll talk to our wholesale partners to find out exactly what they have too, because there are some places that might traditionally have Kosta Brown that have run out, or what exactly the current quantity status is. I am seeing.
Anybody want to take the 2025 question?
I'm happy. So I was born and raised here. I'm happy to take it. It's fine. I was born and raised here in Sonoma County. I mean, since 2015, we have been dealing with fires in Sonoma County on a different level than what I experienced growing up here. From a Kosta Brown stand, 2020 was the first vintage that we have been affected by fires. The biggest thing for us as a team is that our team was safe. I was evacuated from my home during one of the fires. There were a couple, but the rest of our team was okay. We did, quite honestly, and again, this is about being transparent, Russian River and Sonoma Coast were not actually hit as hard as the Santa Lucia Highlands was. So we are actually not going to make any wines from the Santa Lucia Highlands in 2020. Those wines are you're not going to see those out in the market. They're list only. So for us with 2020 and the fires, the way I always describe it is we are not going to make wine that has smoke taint. That would be like going to the French Laundry and oh wow, the lights went out. Basically that would be like going to the French Laundry and every single course that you get has a cigarette butt in it. So I think that's the biggest thing that we want to just make sure that people understand is that wineries like Kosta Browne, wineries like Literai, wineries like William Sellium, we're not going to make wine that has smoke. We're not going to make and sell wine that has smoke taint in it. We will make less wine as opposed to making wine that's going to have a flaw like that in it. So I think that's kind of the biggest point. So yeah.
And I think also, you know, for when you start seeing 2020 vintage out in the market, whether it's from Kosta Browne or another winery, we're learning more and more about smoke and smoke taint, both in the US and Australia, as fires have become, unfortunately, something that's more regular to deal with. And smoke actually, new smoke versus old smoke, smoke that gets caught in a valley behaves differently than smoke that might be moving in the wind. You can have a vineyard that is very, very close to where a fire is happening, and the wind might be blowing the smoke in a different direction, and those grapes aren't affected. It can also show up at different times in the winemaking process, which is why it's also great that we make wine the way that we do. If something were to show up unexpectedly, since we don't blend until the very last moment in the process, we have a lot of control over that. So I think like most things, time will tell. I think 2017, at least for Napa wines, which obviously we're not in Napa, but I think that's a great example of an area that experienced a lot of fires, and we're finding a lot of those wines are actually drinking really well, and not everything was destroyed by fire or smoke taint. So, you know, every vintage has its challenges. This one, 2020, I think for all of us in our personal lives, our own vintage, and wine was no different this year. So, but we will have wine, and we're excited to see what comes out of it, because I think we were also able to pick a lot of things before certain fires started. You know, there were a few unexpected heat spikes, so we went and got grapes before some of those things happened, and we got our fruit into the winery before other things might have prevented us from doing so. So as Kate pointed out, the important thing is everybody was safe, and we were able to take care of the team. And bonus is that there's winemaking to be had after that.
That's great. Any other questions out there from any of the viewers, tasters? What did we think? Food pairings for Gap's Crown. I like that. I'll take that away. If I'll start there, and then Paige and Kate can chime in.
Go for it.
To me, this is perfect. I love this wine, or this style of wine, with wild boar. Wild boar roasts are probably my favorite, with like a pork cherry sauce. It just brightens it. There's enough heft behind it in a very good way, and enough structure and balance, along with the savory notes, to go super well with that. That with like a homemade spätzle or something of that nature, like a little pasta with some like Brussels sprouts, something on the heartier side, I think it would go fantastic. Ladies?
Yeah, this, you know, I think boar is a great call. I think like duck or game fowl, you know, something that has a little bit more of that kind of earthiness to the meat. That spätzle is sounding really great right now. You're making me really hungry, Dan. I actually, you know, Gap's Crown for me has it almost has a citrus note to it, like a blood orange, or you know, something winter citrus behind some of that red fruit, which I think with something like boar, duck, guinea hen, you know, is going to add like some brightness and play really nicely with that food. I see bolognese coming out there, Dan. I'm also, you know, I'm ready for some hearty pasta right now. I hope you guys all have a great dinner planned.
Right. Any other questions out there for the Kosta Browne team, about the wines, about pairings, about tasting notes, about how to get your hands on more of this great juice?
Feel free to unmute if you want to,
yeah.
Or chat box, whatever your fancy is.
We might have one.
I will say we would love to have you. Like I said, we're taking very limited COVID safe appointments right now, but if you are heading north a little bit, give us a call and we'll see what we can do. And hopefully in the not so distant future, we'll be able to plan something a little bit more expansive. And I look forward to getting to visit you at the Battery as well. I'm staring at that wine room, Dan, and I want to get in there, see what you've got hiding. So.
Well, we look forward to having you for sure, and we look forward to seeing everybody back. Thank you all for joining us. This was great. This was our first one that we've done this way, virtual tasting, and I'm a fan. So I had a great time. So I hope everybody else did too. Yeah, if you have
great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Be safe. Hope to see you soon. Enjoy some great vino. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
So much.